Charlie Cumley, great solo sailor, but what were you doing at the Tiger Trophy in an OK?
Good question, actually. The reality was, it's something I've always kind of toyed with the idea of having a little play with. I phoned up Nick Craig and managed to scab his finest vessel off him and his decent rig. So there's an opportunity really for me to go and have a little sail in one, and potentially look at some new sails that we're developing here in the UK anyway. So it kind of killed two birds with one stone. So
tell us about the Saturday of the Tiger Trophy.
Fresh, I think, would be the underlying comment. We obviously first time out, hadn't had a chance to get out on the boat beforehand, so luckily I had a 5-minute tune up with Nick before we left the shore, and then I was off, and it was blustery. Got down there, first race started, and it was already, got down to the bottom lake, and you're like, actually, it's blooming windy now.
How much would you say it was?
I mean, we kind of launched and it wasn't too bad, probably 20 knots. Sailed down to the bottom by the bottom of the lake, and it was gusting 25, and then it just sort of picked up. And it was more of the issue was, as well as the general wind strength rising, was just the gusts and the shifts in the gusts. So it made it pretty hard trying to pick your way upwind as well as getting around the course downwind as well.
So how many jibes did you get in on that day?
2. I was pretty proud of myself, although I did find a particularly light spot to do it in, so bailed out most of the time.
But did you see the whole day through? Because not many did.
No, I had a pretty epic nosedive moment. That's when I realised that the OKs were pretty bow happy to go down the mine, and that was just at the bottom of the run. I did one more beat, and I thought, no, I'm not going to do the embarrassing one of walking into and telling Nick that I just dropped his wild rig over the front of the boat. So I bailed out, and unfortunately they didn't do any racing results-wise, which helped me. So.
Well, what we want to talk to you about is what happened on the following day, which was the pursuit race, which is a little bit lighter, right?
Yeah, and it's actually it started off considerably lighter than the Saturday, but gradually built through the day, and it was pretty breezy by the end of it as well. So, but at least got a chance to look at sort of an OK sat on the side rather than just flat out holding on.
Great.
Nice.
Well, let's have a look at that race in a little bit more detail. We've got some technology, and you can talk us through that race.
Okay.
So, Charlie, you're in a boat that you're not used to. Does that change your approach to how you would approach the start of a race like this, the pursuit race at the Tiger Trophy?
A little bit, yes. Mainly because obviously I was in the same start as the lasers, so there's a good few of them. So there's a few other boats on the start line. Having not raced or lined up against them before, I wasn't really sure how I'd go upwind. I thought I'd be a little bit quicker, but I wasn't sure. Quite a short first beat, so although I wanted to be on the sort of left-hand side of the racetrack, because I thought there'd be some left-handers, the boat end was a little bit biased, and I thought, well, if I start to windward of the guys, at least I've got starboard advantage and not have to do a whole sort of tack and duck. So that was really my thought process, and at least then being on the sort of windward hip off the start line, I could get a bit of a feel for where I would be speed-wise and height-wise.
And from what we can see on the video, this is using a Garmin GPS video strapped on the bow of the boat. It looks like it had a pretty good start.
Yeah, it was half decent. Luckily, the lasers had set up at the boat, but because it was breezy, they soon drifted off. So I was kind of sat quite high and just managed to kind of round the boat and be pretty close. So.
There's a couple of other boats that you were racing around with. Craig Williamson is one of the boats we'll be looking at, and one of the lasers. He's done very well in the GJW Direct Sail Juice Winter Series. Jack Hanslope is another one we'll be looking at. It looks like they were doing quite a lot of battling between themselves, which must have helped you a bit, right?
Yeah, they're obviously pretty close as a group in the lasers, and it's another thing where unusual boat. I thought I won't go tacking on every shift. I'll just try and keep it in a straight line for as much as possible, so I kind of kept out their way a little bit, and it just enabled me to kind of keep the boat keep going at a decent speed, straight line, and hopefully get a few shifts along the way. So
well, as you come out of the start, you're to windward of the other two lasers that we're looking at, and it looks like you had a little bit of an inside lift early on.
Yeah, just a little lifted off the start line and enabled me to go a little bit fast forward just to get over the top of them, if you like, and then lead them into that left-hand side, which I thought was going to get knocked and tack over onto port. So that fortunately did happen, but I think as I got further up towards the beat, I went a little bit too far left, and
what was the problem with
breeze.
Okay, yeah. Well, we see that a little bit later in the video. In fact, you can start to see that it's lightening up, and you're sitting a little bit more. What I like to see is you're always grinning. You always got a smile on your face.
Grinning or gurning, Andy? That's what
I was giving you the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
But anyway, you eventually tack over, but most of the lasers are already to the right of you. So, do you think that you went a little bit too far left?
Yeah, I should have just kept to the left-hand side of them and then pushed over towards the starboard ley line, which actually had a little bit more pressure. I ended up doing a double tack right at the top as well in really light airs, and you can tell by
and we think you hit the mark.
Oh really?
Yeah.
As well. Oh
yeah.
Wow.
How do you plead?
I would say not guilty, but there is a video evidence, so that I could be on a sticky wicket.
Well, we could run that 20 times and we probably wouldn't be able to tell, so we'll give you the benefit of the doubt.
That's good, thanks.
But it looks like it was a little bit of a squeeze at that windward mark there.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, probably again, because unusual boat, it didn't tack quite as quickly as I thought it was going to be, and I couldn't, it's fairly tight trying to get underneath the starboard tackers on the ley line, so I was probably a little bit cheeky in fairness at the top mark. And I managed to tack into a huge header as well, so I pretty much tacked head to wind at the mark, which was a nice touch. This bit was tricky as well because it had gone light, and then there were gusts coming down, so some boats had gone high, some boats had gone low. Just big speed differences.
So Charlie, you pulled away nicely from people at that first mark. You just squeezed around just in front of the lasers, and then we're seeing a really nice gap opening up, but the breeze is picking up as well. What are your thoughts at this point?
At this point, it's just trying to keep a bit of clear air. There's obviously a gaggle of boats just on my windward hip as well as the boats in front of me that we're gradually sort of closing into as we're getting the gusts. So it was just trying to plot your way down there whilst trying to stay in clear air, really.
And we see the lasers starting to close in on you, particularly on the tracking. You can see that really nicely. At what point do you start to realise that these lasers have legs on you as the breeze picks up?
As soon as the first gust arrived and the OK didn't really accelerate, and it just bore a bit of a bigger hole in the water. The lasers were able to accelerate and play much earlier in those gusts, and were taking the yards at me pretty quickly.
And so what do you do defensively in that kind of situation?
Well, it was just looking, unfortunately this is it turned into being a sort of a tighter reach here into a broader reach and then onto a run, so you're kind of a little bit limited because the pressure, I thought the pressure would be further into the middle of the lake, but then you're having to sail really deep and you're getting boats going high, so it's really just trying to pick your way through again, and in a boat that feels a little bit slower downwind, it's quite hard to do that.
Yeah, and as we get to this next mark, you're still just ahead, but Craig Williamson is right up on your transom by then. So you bear off low at the next mark. He goes a lot higher. What were your reasons for going low there?
From memory, there was a slow boat in front of us, which was pretty much on the run line. There was the group of lasers which he was part of, which went high, and actually they got a gust, I think, and accelerated round to windward. And I didn't think I'd have the speed to do that, so I went low to try and get inside at the next mark. But I think they lost. I lost a bit there.
Let's see how that worked out for you. So Charlie, here you going low, and we can see just going out of picture, the lasers above you. With the benefit of hindsight, was this still the right thing to do?
Probably not. Although it's a little tricky because if I had gone high, yes, there was a little bit more pressure high, but I think the lasers would have rolled me. So it was tricky. I thought if I stayed low, at least I'd keep clear air. But there's a tricky balance. Probably staying high with those guys may have been a little bit, boat to boat would have been a bit better. But it's quite a tricky little leg, this one. As well, it was shifty and up and down in pressure.
And getting windier as we go down there. How does that work for the OK against the laser?
Worse.
So the windier it gets, the worse it gets.
It just doesn't seem to go that much faster. Whereas the laser just gradually, does a lot of planing, and they're much easier to steer on those. As the waves are big enough now, the lasers are steering quite a lot, and the OK is a little bit more of a slower beast on those turns. So.
One of the things we're trying to do in the winter series is always try and balance up the PY handicaps as fairly as we can. Seeing as you're probably not going to be back in an OK anytime soon, or maybe you can tell us.
You never know.
Maybe you will.
Yeah.
But how do you rate the relative handicaps of a laser and an OK?
Well, I think from experience, I think the laser seems fairly decent. You know, every class has its ups and downs. Certainly, in comparison, the OK seems a pretty hard handicap to work to. Speaking to Nick afterwards, he did mention that was the case, and not to get too depressed in handicap racing, but so it wasn't just me that struggled, I think. But upwind it's fine, it's just downwind it struggles a little bit compared to the lasers.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, we'll have to bear this in mind for future years.
Yeah, exactly. Get the handicap sorted.
So, Charlie, you're not a big fan of the OK downwind, but how had it worked out for you by the bottom of this long run?
It was, as you can see from the footage now, I'm kind of into a group of Enterprises and GP14s that had been started just before me. So there's a little bit more boat-on-boat racing going on. So you're trying to defend a little bit against the lasers that are faster, and also trying to pick your way through the slower boats that we're starting to eat into. So. And
obviously this isn't one design racing. How much does that change your tactics, the way that you approach a pursuit race in a multi-class kind of event like this?
Yeah, it's always hard in a way, because if you haven't sailed against the other boats in the boat you're sailing, it's quite hard trying to work out where they benefit, where you benefit, particularly upwind, how high you can sail. Can you hold a lane upwind, on their hip, or do you have to tack off and go lower and faster? So it's a bit learning, who you're racing against, really.
And what did you find? You went round this mark, and then you were back on the beat in amongst a bunch of other boats. What could the OK do against the other boats around you?
I think, actually, given a free bit of water, upwind it trucks along quite nicely. It's got a carbon rig, the sail fits quite nicely, and it's not light, so it goes through the chop quite nicely. So if you could get some clear air, you could often do some damage against the other single-handers anyway. Even if not the two-handers that were just marginally faster generally, but a little bit lower.
And in terms of what you're seeing with this technology, the tracking and the video, what do you take away from it?
It's actually really interesting. I wasn't sure, for example, whether I'd gained on coming out here after Mark 5 early tack, but being able to see that and match what you're sort of feeling and seeing on the water with actual evidence is fantastic, because a lot of the time it's a little bit, well, my view was this, his view was that, but actually having the evidence there right in front of you is really clear.
So does it bring it all back to you? You say your memory was fading. But
yeah, it's slowly coming back to me now, which is great. And it's something it'd be nice to be able to review afterwards. For like you say, 2 or 3 weeks afterwards, you still be able to pick up the highlights and what worked and what didn't work, which is nice. And
you're a great single-handed sailor. Do you do coaching for other people?
Yeah, I do some coaching as well, particularly, like you say, in single-handers. Generally, the same sort of theme applies across a lot of the boats. So I'm a little bit worried now, because I'm the one under the video, so I'm going to get the abuse for not keeping the boat flat or not powering up and powering down quick enough. But it's definitely good to get back and see your footage of yourself as well. Keep yourself on top.
So first time in an OK, marks out of 10, what do you give yourself based on what you've seen here?
Maybe a 6, I would say.
A 6? Yeah. Well, not very good, Charlie.
No,
so what needs improvement?
I would say downwind, and through the boat. You can tell I didn't do many tacks or jibes. That's mainly because I was falling over through most tacks and jibes. So I think maybe a little work on corners.
Well, very honest of you, and great to get your commentary on that. Thanks very much, Charlie.
Thank you.